Welcome to Woman On. I'm your host, Maxie McCoy, and you know this. We are talking this season to the women and people making 2020 actually somewhat inspiring. Remember, if you love what you are listening to here, there's a worksheet that you can get, that you can download right now and really reflect on this wisdom. Go to womanoncollective.com/worksheet. Totes free. And if you want to come hang out with me and other amazing women every Tuesday to talk about these episodes, do that. Join the collective. Your first week is free. womanoncollective.com/collective. A lot of goodness for you there. All right. My next guest is Naj Austin. She is an entrepreneur. She is a founder. She is the CEO of Somewhere Good, a social and wellness platform centering people of color through community, through arts, and through culture. She was recently named one of Inc.'s 100 female founders transforming America. Hi, she's amazing. And did I mention, this is a woman who leads with joy in everything that she does. And I think we could all use a little bit more of that, especially right now. So Naj first popped on my radar as the founder of the IRL version of Somewhere Good, which was called Ethel's Club. And I, at the time, was leading up programming across 10 different working and social spaces for a company called The Riveter. Simultaneously, I was also a member of the women's social club, The Wing. And while I've always been a community builder that believes so deeply in the tenets of intersectional feminism, largely because I had the most amazing mentor ever teaching me how, shout out to you, Miss Tiffany Dufu, it took those particular experiences to help me realize that someone like me, a white, cis, hetero-abled woman, cannot and should not be the one deciding and designing curriculum or experiences that are specifically for women of color. Hi and duh. That's just not how it works. And it can become really harmful really quickly, which is the opposite of anyone's intentions, especially mine. But intention isn't the same as impact, as we've learned. So that is why I am obsessed with Naj's work. Tech companies and admittedly many folks in the female empowerment space have been touting one version of community for years, but Naj is rethinking and redefining what that means, especially recently. So instead of looking on her phone, she's looking out her window. Instead of looking at an avatar and handle, she's encouraging us to go deeper. And she's building community in her life and in her work by centering joy. I'll tell you, in the days following this interview, I tried to practice more of what Naj shared, centering joy in my day and my choices and my interactions and in my mindset. It was life-giving because honestly, this year has not felt like one wide open year of joy. It's felt heavy and it's felt hard and oftentimes pretty unjoyful. So that's why I think that you are going to love this episode. I hope you feel a bit more joy when you finish listening to this conversation than when you started. And I do believe that you'll be inspired to rethink how you create and support the communities that you belong to. Here's Naj Austin on centering joy and redefining community. You named Ethel's Club after your grandmother. Can you tell us a little bit about her and how she inspired and informed that space?
100%. So my grandmother was very much a powerhouse. She was a force when she walked into a room, and she was well known in her community as an organizer. I don't think she would have ever identified as such, but she fed the community. She often housed the community. She cared a lot about the youth in the community. And so when I was starting Ethel's Club, I spent a lot of time thinking about what is the heart of this company that I'm pouring myself into, sort of, what's the legacy? And I kept coming back to family ties and that sort of familial spirit that when you feel it, it makes you think of home, and it's a smell and it's a touch. And how do we embed that into this product that we're building? And as I was sort of taking notes and writing, what that looked like to me, I kept coming back to my grandmother Ethel. And as I'm building this company to be my legacy, I wanted it to be connected to all that she had done in her life as well.
Yeah. How did it end up showing up in the space? And I love that you are giving us an example of what a North Star looks like in the choices that we make. What were some of those choices for you as you were building it or decorating it or branding it?
A lot of it came from this feeling of wanting it to feel cozy and warm.
Yeah.
And the biggest tenet of what we built, which is that it should feel joyful. When you go to your grandparents' house, it's always fun, right? They let you have snacks, they let you stay up, and it feels a very specific kind of way. And we wanted people, when they walked into Ethel's Club, to feel that as well. In terms of our branding, she loved the color red. So we have a lot of red influenced in terms of.
Grandmother's in red, right? Mine too. It's like one of those, it's like the red lipstick that sticks with me.
Exactly. So a lot of that, and again, going back to cozy, we made a big choice about not having leather or sort of hard, harsh colors, things that made you feel like enjoyable and like you were in a safe place.
Yeah. Well, you have brought up a lot that I want to talk about, which is not only that joy, but first I want to ask you about community specifically, because as you were building Ethel's Club as a safe space for people of color, you have done that magnificently, and I'm curious what this year specifically, in a world where we can't come together in these physical spaces, how has that transformed the way you've thought about community?
Yeah, so obviously we had a big shift about 4 months in the Ethel's Club existing as a physical space here in Brooklyn. And when we moved digitally, I think even for me, I was not as aware of how deep the problem was on a global scale. Within the first week of us having a digital membership, we had members as far as London, Paris, the Netherlands, people who were looking for community and for events and for a space to feel safe. And so as much as I was championing the fact that it was needed, I think even I had no idea how large it was. I think COVID has brought to light the fact that people of color are also so marginalized online. So, we were tackling the physical aspects of it, which when you're creating this literal space, it's easy to kind of control how that works. Much more different when you're talking about a digital space. But we've done a lot to ensure that when people join, that they feel immediately safe and warm and connected with one another.
Yeah.
And people love it. We now have over 1,500 members on a global scale, which has been really awesome to see that we're able to meet all of these needs for a member who lives in Iowa, to a member who lives in Brooklyn, to a member who lives in the Netherlands. We're still able to provide a space for everyone.
Yeah, it's so interesting that even you, someone who is dedicated, her life and her work right now to this, to the effort of creating that safe space, to not even realize, the breadth of the problem, which is probably just a reflection of the fact that patriarchy and systematic racism is controlling fucking everything. And this year pushing back on that has been, I think so needed, and also such a burden for those who are having to educate and to unravel for us, we people, white women who should be doing that work on their own. And for you, as you created that safe space that is physical and then digital, how were you having to take care of yourself in that, especially in this year and in this summer? Because I know you talk about joy, and we're going to go there.
Yeah.
I'm curious what the flip side of that burden of holding that space has looked like for you.
So I have been very transparent in my journey that I am terrible at taking care of myself. I am very much a giver, and I'm always working towards how can we make it more accessible, right? How can we offer more empowerment and more agency to our members, to people who aren't members? So even in my time when I am not working and or not near a computer, I'm still thinking about it. And so I have to work really hard to sort of turn my brain off and sort of change the direction of how I operate. So my one solution that I've been working on for about a week and a half has been journaling in the morning, because I think I wake up with this sort of intense energy of I'm going to solve this problem today. which means from the, from that first moment, it's sort of a go, go, go fashion. And I'm trying to respect myself more by containing even 20, 30 minutes in the morning where I think about something else. That being said, Ethel's Club has 3, healing and wellness events that are held every day. So I try to go to them, but, I'll have it on and then I'll answer an email. It kind of falls apart. But I have been trying to proactively, make time for myself. But it requires me to have to sit down and say, you are making time for yourself right now, whether you want to or not.
Yes. It's so interesting, right? The things that you build end up building you if you let yourself be a part of that community and a part of that safe and now, digital space. On the topic of safe digital spaces, you were invited into the Time Talk speared by Meghan Markle and Prince Harry. First,
Yes.
Congratulations. I actually want to know, what was it like getting that phone call?
It was bizarre. Their chief of staff reached out and she said, I saw your tweet about Somewhere Good. You're building this new online platform. I'd love to hear more. And at that point, I didn't know that she was their chief of staff. And so I'm like, oh, of course, I'll talk to this really smart, amazing woman who I briefly looked up. And on the call, she says, oh, and by the way, I'm the chief of staff for Meghan Markle and Prince Harry, or I'm sorry, the Duchess and Duke of Sussex. And I said, oh, that's cool, because I had no idea what to do with the gravity of that information. And so I chatted with her for probably like an hour and a half. And she said at the very end, like, that was great. I'd love if you could do this Time Talk with us. It'll be basically this. And I was like, let me check my calendar. I'm free. It's great.
I'm going to be very free for that.
Yes.
And I love that. Thank you for sharing that moment. You can see my cheeks are about to fall off for you. I just can imagine being like, yeah, I'll talk to you. And then like, oh shit. So in the conversation of a safe digital space and I'm so happy that you were a part of that conversation, because I think that, as this has come to light around the social dilemma, is bringing a lot of this to kind of the common conversation, things that have been like your life's work right now, and none of this is new to you. So when you see these conversations very much, kind of popping up about what it means to create a safe digital experience, what's missing based on the work that you're doing that you feel like people should know about and it's missing in the conversation?
Yeah, so the biggest thing I'd say is that a lot of these social platforms have doubted the power of truly belonging and the power of identity. I think that's coupled with the fact that a lot of these social platforms are built by the same type of person. They tend to be white, they tend to be male, they tend to be heterosexual, with the same sort of experience and background. The social platforms that currently exist, to me, are very derivative of one another with different feature sets. What we want to do and what we see as missing is thinking about it from a completely different standpoint from the ground up. What does it look like when a social platform is built by a team of Black, Latinx, queer people? What do we prioritize? What is important to us as, potential users of the app, obviously, but also what have we seen as we've navigated the internet, and what would we change if we had the power? And I think a lot of people who come from marginalized communities often have these fantasies of, oh, if I built this, I would do it that way. But we're often not offered the funds or ability to dream and kind of build those futures. And we're in a really unique position where we can. And so there is obviously the pressure of, championing a product for everyone else, but also a lot of power in it, because I think with our backgrounds and who we are as people, my team, we have a unique perspective that can't be bought or can't be faked by these other platforms.
Yeah. When you talk about that and you layer it onto just the natural need and desire and human nature of belonging, I feel like, that's absolutely something that has gotten brought to the surface this year,
Yes.
exacerbated even.
Yep.
To people who are listening who are feeling like they don't lack or that they don't have that belonging because of what they look like or who they love or what their background is or their education or lack thereof,
Sure.
what do you find helps people as you're building this out and you're testing and you're working with your team and you're mining your own experiences? What actually leads to belonging?
So I think the power of reflection is incredibly important in that journey. So important that when we were designing the physical clubhouse of Ethel's Club, we installed mirrors around the club. From the point in which you first walk in, the first thing you see is yourself, because we wanted to really layer in on the fact that the product we're building is about the people, and it's about the people feeling seen and empowered while they're here. Ethel's Club, in essence, is four walls and some furniture. Like that is actually what it is. It's become this bigger thing because of the humans who are members who have joined. And we will never take away from that fact. And that's always been our secret sauce, is we care about our customers and we make sure that they feel empowered and seen when they're there. There are no other tricks up my sleeve. I promise that's it.
And just listening. I'm just listening. Yeah.
I'm just listening. And again, being a group of people who are marginalized throughout most of our lives, I know what it's like to walk in and feel comfortable. And I know what it's like to not have that and how terrible that feels. And so when people say, how do you make a strong community in terms of people who feel left out? I think it's again, feeling reflected and connect with people in that regard of saying, you're also a Latinx queer woman who lives in Brooklyn. So am I. That's amazing. We now have this magic moment that most likely, many people have gone their entire lives without having. And so we get to own that experience for people, and it's so magical and so special.
Just the visual that you just gave us of, those mirrors being there and being able to reflect back that, you are here and being able to see yourself in that reflection and both the meta reflection too. Yep. It's such a visual that I'm grateful for. And as I'm thinking, as you're talking about, your experience in building those spaces and listening to women, my background for the last decade has been in community building. And I have been a part of teams and people and projects that have listened to people and built from that. People often ask me how I came up with my book, You're Not Lost. I'm like, because women told me that they felt lost in every city from every demographic for so many years. And I wrote that answer. It's not something that I pulled out of my head. But I've been a part of teams that didn't listen to women or tried to, as white women, build things for people of color when they never should have been at the helm of those conversations, of those types of events. And, there's been so much press, no lack of press on, the white female led space and what has gone wrong there. And I'm curious what your perspective on that has been as you have been doing something so intentionally and creating such a space of listening for the people who want things to be built by them, for their narrative to be centered.
Yes, I think about this a lot for obvious reasons. I think the biggest issue that stands in front of those leaders of those companies and anyone who's thinking about building something like that is that none of them, or very few of them, were built with intersectionality in mind from the beginning. You can't tack on inclusivity at the end, because then the question becomes, inclusive to what? I have to mold myself into a space that you've created that never had me in mind. Consumers have become savvy, right? I think there are so many opportunities to look for community or look for connections, whether it's online or in physical spaces. And people aren't going to put up with things that feel false. And if it's not done in the very beginning, which means if you have a founding team, what does that team look like? What do they believe are the tenets of the community? How do they believe in moderation and what that looks like? Really kind of honing in on all these things and having really long, hard, arduous talks that will forever happen. I think people often think like, cool, we made a code of conduct, we're done. And the code of conduct should be poked at every single day of, should we change this? Should we make this stronger? Should we add to it? Every document we've put out, we call it a living document, because we are not perfect and we are always working and striving towards making a more intersectional community, which means that document will change. And so I think a lot of these communities have not started off with an intersectional group, which means that the product is not intersectional, which means that consumers who come from these marginalized communities know that, and then they don't want to be a part of it. And so then you start this strange thing that happens where these communities start to actively seek out others. And then you run into the tokenism problem, the problem of wanting to sprinkle in diversity. And none of it is what I'm looking for. None of it's, you know,
true.
It's not true. Exactly. It's not genuine. It's not real. And, you know, you can feel it. I've walked into many spaces where I'm like,
cool.
You know, I don't have anything negative to say, but I walk away knowing this space was not met with me in mind, and that's okay. But don't pretend that it is the ask, I think.
Yeah, it's don't pretend that it is a woman to that. And, you know, as, you know, I know the identity that, obviously, that I sit in as a white woman, as a privileged woman. And there are women around me that are like that, who want to support spaces for people of color while also not taking up space. And how do you look at that role, or that even the ability to do that?
So to be honest, I don't think about it often, mainly because I'm so focused on our audience. I think for allies, the number one thing I always kind of propose is to listen. If the space says that, you know, we're here to center and celebrate someone who is not like you, to say, that sounds great. I will share this post on my Instagram and sort of keep it moving. I feel like there's this need to want to kind of get your hands in and get involved. And sometimes, and more times than not, that causes more issues. I think people tend to kind of, you know, want to parachute in and help, which is, I get it. But I also understand where I exist in the world as a privileged, able-bodied Black woman, right? There are other people who have more intersectional identities that I want to, you know, help and be a part of, but I stand back and say, you know, let me know if you need me. I am here.
I'm here.
Sort of take it in that perspective.
That I'm appreciative of that perspective, and it rings bells of other conversations that we've had with Jody Patterson, with Jordan Marie Daniel, about what intersectional work looks like, you know, whether it's the trans community, the Indigenous women's community, and something that came up in a lot of those conversations is much of what you're saying around that intersectional work and being able to stand shoulder to shoulder. And what has that looked like for you, both with Somewhere Good and with Ethel's Club? I know, you know, in some of your conversations about Somewhere Good, you're like, look, all these communities, they exist. We're just finally bringing them together. What has that experience been like as you do create a really intersectional lens on this product and bring lots of different communities together that are centered on, you know, underrepresented voices, but that now here's a place where they can all link up?
It's been incredible because I get to spend my days finding, sourcing, and connecting with these amazing community leaders and creators who have seen the world and found that there isn't a place for them, and they've gone out and built it from nothing. So, you know, I go to bed each night inspired by a lot of these folks. So building Somewhere Good in that regard has been great. And so we're really excited once the app launches in early February to see everyone else find them, right? Exactly. Because it's interesting navigating the world and not even realizing what's missing until you see it. And we've seen that a lot with Ethel's Club, where people say like, I don't get it. And then they join and they're like, how did I ever live without this? This has transformed my existence. And I'm like, it's really nice operating in a space where you're cared for and where you don't have to face discrimination or racism. It's kind of nice, like, who would have thought?
Those basic human needs, who would have thought?
Exactly. And so if you can have that feeling throughout every aspect of your existence in your life, it's a great feeling. And I have it, I have it with my team. I have it with the work that I do and the spaces that I spend my time in when I'm not working, whenever that is. And it's really affirming. And I think, again, when you're talking about marginalized communities, there are not many moments in our day that are affirming in that manner. And if Somewhere Good can give that to people, we have solved many problems all at once.
Because joy is healing, belonging is healing. And I know, you mentioned this at the beginning, and I know this about you, which is that joy is such a through line in what you are creating and how you show up. Why is that? And how do you cultivate it for those of us who are, having more non-joyful moments than joyful ones?
Yes. So
tell us your secret potion.
I know. I feel like I have to plug, a special sauce here. In the work that I do, so much of it is depressing and haunting. People are navigating such emotional turmoil when they come to places like Ethel's Club. And we're trying to solve for a lot of that. And so there's a lot of darkness. But with darkness comes the light that we're able to obviously offer with our healing sessions and our wellness sessions and things like that. The reason joy is so important is because I feel like it often gets left out of the narrative. When you're talking about marginalized communities, none of the words are always left out, burdened, race, it's never
it's
fun,
in the language.
Happy.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I consider one of my life works is to really shift that narrative of what it means when you're talking about marginalized communities, that you think of joy, that you think of happiness, because when we come together, it's a happy moment. It's like a family reunion, it's great. You feel seen. You live in my neighborhood. That's awesome. That feeling should not be lost because of all the other horror that we have to kind of live through. I think people often feel like they're not allowed to have joy. That when you're dealing with these oppressive systems, that joy feels illegal a little bit. And we want to, again, combat that narrative where you need joy to keep going. You need to be healed to keep going. You can't pour all of yourself into that without the other things. So we want to, again, just introduce it into the language of being normal, of being something it's okay to seek. It's okay to be fighting for, equality and intersectionality, and also want joyful moments in your life.
Love what you're hearing? Well, you get to really dive in by joining the 10-week collective, where you'll be put into small groups that meet every week for the entire season, led by one of our brilliant woman-on leaders. They're so brilliant, you're going to love them. We break down the episode themes together every week. We discuss, we learn from each other. It's seriously so fun. And there's some super cozy merch that's exclusive to the collective. That's the Woman On World. We really hope that you'll join us. Now, let's get back to the combo.
Those joyful moments in your Naj's life, where do you find they're sourced from? Is it from your work? Is it from your team? Is it from your, laughs with your peeps, all of the above? Or is there something that you're ritualizing in order to ensure that today I'm going to feel joy, even if I feel shit also?
Yes. So my joy ritual is cooking. I will go in the kitchen.
We're coming over.
Start making stuff. It's my way of getting out some creativity, which brings me joy. And then, putting a concoction together and then seeing what comes out of that. And then ideally, if it's good, there's joy because I'm eating something delicious. So I have that ritual every Sunday. I am very much offline, even in terms of social media, pretty much between 11 and 4. And I just whip up a bunch of stuff. It really ranges. But those are the times where
I saw a soup or a stew or something. Yes. And I was like, bitch, I need that.
Yes. There's often about 6 things happening at one time. It can look a little
sad and potatoes. And I was like, she just really understands me.
Yes, it was a whole thing. But those are my moments. And then there are, obviously the meeting up with friends when we could do that, getting together with friends over Zoom. But my personal ritual is to kind of go in the kitchen and spend some time alone.
I love that for you. And also, I have found, even though I'm the worst cook on the planet, the times that I am in the kitchen, it is that experience of creating. And as somebody who's a writer and is feel very strongly about the fact that I'm here to create.
Mm-hmm.
When I saw that the Ethel's Club sweatshirt had, the big word create on that, I wanted to know so much more about your choice in that. I know it's merch and it's a part of the experience, but I also know that everything you do is intentional. So I'm sure there's a story there, and I wanted to know what it was.
Yes. So one of our beliefs as the team behind Ethel's Club and Somewhere Good is that everyone is a creator. Everyone has something to offer. Everyone is valuable. It's just a journey of discovery as to what that is for you. So we use the word create a lot because we want to implore people to think of themselves as creators. And it's not in the not in the new sort of social media way of you're a creator, which means you're on TikTok creating. We mean like adding value to anything, educating, empowering. I mean, creation is exactly.
Yeah.
And to again, make space where people can have that moment of, maybe I am a creator, and kind of step into that power and then have a space to actually create if they have that urgency as well. And so we love the word create. We use it all the time. It's obviously in a lot of our language, but we see it as a pathway towards, an inner journey, an external journey, a community journey, creating with each other, creating alone. It's all important.
Yeah. And it's the way that you have, as you're talking about it, it's just all of that is joy. Like when we build and we create, we're creating something new and better and likely in the reflection of what this world actually is, not what the structures say that it is.
Exactly.
And, as you mentioned, creating community, right? Creating moments with each other. You and I talked about what community has looked like for you this year and how it has shifted. And, I think community is such a grossly buzzy word, not when you use it, and hopefully not when I use it, but when the rest of the world markets with it. I'm like, y'all don't even fucking understand what community actually is. And so what do you think it should be? And what has it been in your year this year, maybe in a different way than you potentially thought of it?
Yeah, so I think I thought of community pre-COVID as like-minded people gathering around a shared X, right? It could be a shared passion, a shared interest, something that makes people feel more tied together than normal equals community. And, I think there's validity to that. I think that is true. But I think the truer form of community, which I found through COVID, is actually sharing space with people in times of hardship and trying to find those moments of joy and safety. An example I'll give is I live in Crown Heights, which is a neighborhood in Brooklyn. And, when COVID happened, it was strange for everybody in a lot of ways and impacting Black and Brown communities at a really wild level. And my community is a Black and Brown community, and it's an elderly community. And I had to ask myself, how do I show up for this real life community that I'm in? Whether or not I realized it before, this is my community now. Yeah. And what part do I play here? And I think we saw in the news with New York City of a lot of people leaving and saying, oh, this isn't working for me. I'm going somewhere else where it's better. And I think that was a really good showing of how most people don't actually pour into their communities. They either are passive and or they take and then they leave. And to really be a part of a community, it's a give and take model, right? You are offering, you are sharing, you are helping. And then when you need those things, other people are helping you. And that was my biggest takeaway after living through, I mean, we're still living through it, but I think that sort of that first peak of COVID was really showing up for people, not because we share necessarily like-minded values or morals or interests, but because we're humans living in the same space and we deserve to treat each other with respect and care. And sort of that's how low the bar is, right? Treat your neighbors kind, which I think we've lost a little bit.
Well, and as you're saying that, I'm giggling in a way, because it is that feeling of neighborly, of like, what does a neighbor even mean? I mean, I live in a building with, there's 7 other units here. And it wasn't until the pandemic that my elderly neighbor, that I was actually running errands for him because he couldn't go out. And I'm like, why have I not been doing this for Ralph prior? Like, I'm taking a meeting while I'm on the phone, dropping something off at the mailbox for him. And it just, I think the thing we miss in those community neighborly moments is that it fills us with the joy that you're talking about. Like, it really feels good to be able to help. And why do you think it is that we're not, that it took a pandemic for some of us to lean into where we are with the people that we're at? And to see community as those small micro moments that you're talking about.
I think there are just so many distractions. I mean, you're on your phone, you're going to this party, you're going to Soul Cycle, or going to, like, you're constantly going, and now we can't go. And so I think we've been forced to sit. I mean, the first time I really looked out my window was definitely in April, where I was like, this is a really nice tree. Has this tree always been here? Like, it was a moment of realization that I have been operating in a very different world than the one I actually am taking space up in. And what does it mean to kind of nurture where I actually am living? And, pre-COVID, me walking to the coffee shop was my head buried in my phone and then jumping on the subway. Me now, it takes like 40 minutes because all my neighbors want to talk. It's very familial. And I feel like if I had a question, an emergency of any sort, I have easily 11 people I can easily go to. And that feeling of care is radical to me. It's radical to my life. And as we've sort of unpacked individually and as a collective with our team, we're seeing the same thing with other people saying, as you've mentioned, I looked around and why wasn't I doing this beforehand? And so how can we embed that same sense in the things that we are doing? That feeling of we are all pouring into this, then we're all taking out, but we can always refill our cups because everyone's kind of playing their parts.
Yeah. And it as you're describing that, it's like you belong there. That's also, it's that, and that's how I feel here. Like, yeah, there's people that would notice if I was gone.
Exactly.
Put it really darkly, potentially.
Yes.
Do you think, as you kind of talk about looking out your window and seeing that tree for the first time and this speed slowing down, even though I know that it's not slow in your internal world with all that you're building and speaking out on and holding space for, but do you think that you will return to that life, or has this forever and radically changed how you show up?
Oh, I think this has totally changed all of my perspectives in terms of my own community, but helping other people kind of find and foster theirs. Again, rethinking about the word community all of the time and not letting it be this, what I think it is today, but what is community tomorrow? What is community in a year? What does community look like digitally? I mean, I'm obsessed with like trying to sort of grasp at all the different meanings that I know and the ones that I don't know. But 100% my life has been changed in the fact that I want to honor the community that I live in. And so as we're building a digital world, what does that mean to combine the two? How do we make it so that we aren't building another time-sucking, soul-sucking social platform? How do we add value in all of those ways? And so we're thinking about a lot of things, but that's definitely been a driver in terms of how we're building out somewhere good, is that I want to make sure we don't lose sight of the communities that we all actually live in as well.
Yeah. And as you talk about those other social outlets and channels, do you spend time there, and does it in a way to inform what you're building? Does it crush your soul when you are there? Like, what is your relationship to the thing that you're building against?
I'm protective of my time and energy, and I don't necessarily want to spend it in spaces where I feel unsafe, where I might stumble upon racism. I have very much chosen to live outside of that. And, in my head, they're all the same. Again, it's the same kind of person creating the same kind of company, but this one is voice or video. This one is ephemeral video. This one's long form. Like, it's the same story. They all lack moderation. They're all not built with me in mind. And so for me, it's just a waste of time. What we are building is so unlike those in almost every way that it wouldn't even be comparable to spend time to kind of.
Yeah, you're like, I've had enough time there. I know. We all know.
I'm like, I get it.
Get that, do that. Awesome. Moving on.
Exactly.
As you have been building this year during a time that I think a lot of people have felt very creatively stifled. That is something that I've heard from all different types of creative women at various times this year, of just not feeling creative, not feeling like they could build. How, when the world felt really hard, did you still show up to create? Was it hard for you, and your bigger purpose was drawing you forward? Or what was your relationship to creativity this year?
I mean, we had members emailing me saying, so what are you going to do? There wasn't really a ton of time to say, one, we're not even sure. We have people who depend on what we've built to influence their positivity in life, to influence their well-being. So thinking about it from that perspective, it felt maybe easier, because for me, it was, they are our North Star, right? Enabling people who feel left out of the narrative to have space to belong is what drives me to create. And that only got more magnified with COVID. It almost is like, okay, well, I know that you're all online. I know that we all are dealing with this big thing. I'm going to create a space that is kind and intentional and meant to alleviate that anxiety and chaos.
Were you alleviated by doing that? Like, I imagine this wasn't you weren't riding one giant high of this year, and that there were probably some lows. Did that building kind of take you out of those lows, or did you just kind of sit in your shit? What did you do?
I mean, it was definitely a distraction. I think instead of being able to kind of doom scroll, I was trying to figure out how to build this digital clubhouse in 24 hours, like my mind is luckily pulled away from the bad parts of the internet. And at the peak of the coronavirus last March, it was like pure chaos online. Like, no one knew what was going on. And so instead of opting into that, or maybe even falling into it, because I think it was kind of inescapable, I was like, I have to build this thing. Sorry, like I can't be watching the news all day. Like, as much as I may want to, I'm going to build this thing over here. The news is going to do the news. So it's been helpful for me to work through what it means to create space in this time, and then to constantly be iterating on that.
Yeah, it's as you're talking about, just like, I didn't have time to watch all of this, all of this craziness, kind of take shape this year. And there really is like so much power in not consuming and choosing to, which is obviously a tenet of your work, but to create instead and be really intentional with what it is that you do consume. And when you are looking at what you do consume and who you spend your time with, and you are a Black woman that is fundraising in a notoriously racist, patriarchal system of venture capital. What has that experience been like for you this fall? Have you chosen to fundraise outside of the system? Have you chosen to lean into the system and do it a different way? As you're changing, the game for other Black female founders that are coming up with you?
So I think it's been a combination of both. I think it's more been pointed to find the right people in whatever world. So we found people deep in Silicon Valley who have been working towards change in their own ways. We found people who have given up on Silicon Valley, who are working towards change. One of the things I did when we were in our investor meetings was lead the call by saying, if you don't believe that the internet is inherently broken and needs to be radically imagined in almost every way, you're not the best investor for our company.
Woo.
And you'd be surprised as to how many people were like, well, what do you mean broken? And I'm like, all right, this is not.
I think we can end here.
But that was easy for me. That's a really easy, I don't have to have some sort of like moral gut check later. That is the gut check. And if you don't believe that, then we're on two totally different planes. And so
if
we found some
that you are a fish in water, and I have to explain water to you, then
exactly. It's not going to work. I'm busy. I don't have time to explain it.
I mean, that is such a brilliant tactic that, whether we're talking about boundaries, whether we're talking about, who we want to partner with, be in community with, like your opening statements of who you are and how you see the world can be such a filtering system for that. How did your community support you in that journey?
In regard to the fundraising aspect?
Yeah, fundraising, showing up this year, building new things.
I mean, in all of the ways, our community is incredibly supportive. We have 3 events every day in the Ethel's Club digital clubhouse. We've had some of the talent practitioners reach out and say, do you need a session? Does the team need a session? They are so helpful, so forthcoming with the peak of COVID. Do you need a real estate lawyer? I mean, my cousin does this, we can help. Like, how can we be helpful? And I think that comes back to that original aspect we were talking about in terms of your microcosm. When you need help, people are there to support you, and then you also support them, and it is a continuous circle. So they've been phenomenal in terms of almost everything. And I feel like when I have a question, I'll put it on Twitter, and then like 10 of my members are like, they're at the ready, which has been
you just have
really
an army.
humbling.
Yeah, you have an army of love behind you. One of our favorite things to ask guests is if they have a recent pep text or message that somebody has sent them that's really lifted them up when they needed it. Do you by any chance have that on hand?
I do, actually.
Can you read it to us and tell us who it's from?
So we have an advisor. Her name is Jessica Eggert, and she has been just one joyful to work with, which we've decided is important to me, but also has really been a person for me to lean on with a lot of the unknowns that have happened, obviously this year and even before that, of just saying, you've got this, keep going. And that's the type of thing that at night when I can't go to sleep, that allows me to kind of take a moment and pause. The text she sent me is, and this was totally unprompted, I'm just thinking, what you've built is amazing, and it's all you. You are the genius behind this amazing community and brand. I'm so proud of you. Oh. And she is a mother of 2. Like, she's busy. She's got her job, like all the things. And she took time out to just let me know that I bet things are really hard, because things are always kind of hard. Mm-hmm. And I want you to know that I've got you and your community's got you, and you've built this thing with intention, and so that you can take a moment and pause, because we're sort of here for you, which I just don't think about often, because I'm, running to the next goalpost.
Yeah, I thank you so much for sharing that. And it's it really pulls us kind of full circle on how we started this conversation around reflection, because I think people like that who believe in us can be the reflection we need to also believe in ourselves to that level. 100%. And, I even listening to that unprompted message makes me want to go send some unprompted messages to women I admire and to women who are doing the good work like you. Naj, we have a couple questions before we let you go, which is, sure. First and foremost, what are you batshit grateful for right in this moment?
My team.
Yeah.
This week I have been very affected by just the weather changing in New York and the election and all that chaos. Mm-hmm. And they have allowed me so much grace to literally at 2 p.m. I'm like, I am going to take a nap. It may last until tomorrow. and they're like, we got it, bye. You know, they're like unaffected.
Yeah.
So it's been awesome to have such an incredible group of people building alongside me. I know that I'm at the helm of the company, but I truly mean that none of this would have gotten done to the level of which we have executed without their smart, brilliant, compassionate minds.
Yeah. And well, bravo to them and to you. And the last thing that we want to know is, who is a woman or person on the rise that the Women On community should know about?
So I have a friend I met through Twitter.
Love when that happens.
I know. Her name is Brittany Chavez. She has a company called Shop Latinx. And I met her around the same time I was clothing Ethel's Club. And so we both, you know, had these ideas that we were kind of throwing out there to see if it would stick. And we've spent the last 18 months building, you know, our companies into reality. And it's just been so joyful to watch her grow. And I'm like, oh, I remember when we talked about that, and now you're rolling it out, and that's so exciting. And I'm so proud of her. And she has a team now. And it's, you know, I very much believe in operating from a position of abundance, and how can everyone achieve their goals and feel empowered. And so to see her success has been, it just makes me happy. Like I actually texted her last night being like, yay, I'm just happy about you. Like, I'm so happy about how things have been going.
Yeah. And it's so rewarding watching other people create and creating alongside them. And, you know, we're so, those people breathe so much life into us, even as we're breathing into them. So thank you. We will check her out, and thank you for putting her on our radar. And thank you for being here. We're so grateful for you and what you were building, making this world a better place, woman.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so happy to have been a part of this.
Anything you need support on, we're yours. So thank you.
Thank you so much. This was really great. It's always like therapeutic to do this.
Just
Thank
like
you.
Get it out. Yeah, I know. Same. Just I could listen to you all day. All right. Yes. Thanks, Naj.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
If you're anything like me, you love listening to inspiring stories, but then there always is this little letdown at the end of a show, because it's sort of like, well, now what? How do I put anything into action that I've just heard? Well, at Women On, we're here to solve that. Each episode comes with a free worksheet that you can download to get dirty with all the wisdom and put it in your own life. Just go to womenoncollective.com/worksheet.